we officially kick off our 2024 NHL Draft coverage with our Bald King, Tony Ferrari from the Hockey News, where he joins and we kind of start our look at the 2024 draft class, get to know some of the big names, some of the big questions surrounding this draft, and just, again, we're starting draft season, guys. That's all you need to know. So all that and more on today's episode.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite tanking team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, contributor at San Jose Hockey Now. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Probably part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day, even when they're the worst team in the league, like the San Jose Sharks are. So if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch this on YouTube as well. And our good friend Tony Ferrari joins the show, where we're going to just start our 2024 draft coverage. So this episode's about just kind of getting to know some of the names in the draft, kind of where some of the rankings. And then this one, it's very much there's a lot of questions to be answered. So we talk about some of those questions to be answered as we kind of enter the second half of hockey season. So before we get into it with our good friend Tony, do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you guys by Jace Medical. Empower yourselves with the purchase of a Jace case, providing with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com and use code locked on to get $50 off your order. That's JASEmedical.com. And now we bring in our Bald King, Tony Ferrari. Tony, you know, I only want you for your draft body, so that's why I called you to kickstart our 2024 draft coverage. How's it going, buddy?
Not too bad. Last time I saw you, I think, was at the draft, so I missed you, buddy.
It's been a while. I know. I've been very excited. I know people keep asking me, when are you guys start draft coverage? When are you guys start draft coverage? People were starting the draft coverage, and Tony Ferrari has claimed the Will Scouching role of kicking off the draft. So if you're kind of new to this or new, we're going to start with Tony's early thoughts on the draft. And then eventually I'm sure Tony will be on a bajillion times to talk about deeper prospect dives. But I think we have to start at the top of the draft as a team the Sharks, who have won, as we're recording this on Monday afternoon, they've won 1 out of their last 15 games and are steamrolling towards a potential number 1 pick in this draft. It's Macklin Celebrini, and it's his world this year, right?
Yeah, kind of. The rest of the group after Celebrini is a bit up in the air. Some people like Demidov, some people like Berkey Catton, other people like Caden Lindstrom. You go with one of the defensemen. It really is Celebrini and then kind of a group of guys. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out, because despite the fact that we're now past the midway point, everyone's kind of released 1 or 2 lists at least. There really isn't a consensus on who the next guy is.
Yeah, I mean, last year in comparison, right, it was Bedard, and then you knew the names, right? It was going to be Michkov was kind of the big wild card, right? We knew Leo Carlsson, Adam Vittel. You knew the names, and kind of was just what order, and we got a bit of surprise at the draft with Carlsson going number 2. But this year, like, you can it's Celebrini, and then you can kind of throw everybody's name in a hat, and whatever shakes out. I'm sure everyone's boards are going to be different, but with Celebrini, though, is he worthy of being a number 1 pick in the draft, or is it just because there's so many names in this year's draft where that we really haven't gotten a consensus, or is Celebrini a worthy number 1 pick?
No, he really is a worthy number 1 pick. I think he's a guy that's absolutely torn up the NCAA this year, producing at a rate similar to Adam Fantilli last year. And I think one of the things we talked about with last year's draft is, yeah, if Bedard wasn't in this draft, maybe a Carlsson goes first overall, maybe a Michkov goes first overall, maybe an Adam Fantilli goes first overall. And you really did have 4 or 5 guys that were worthy of being in consideration for first overall in a normal draft. But because we had the generational talent last year, we kind of got spoiled a bit. So Macklin Celebrini is definitely worthy of a first overall pick. but the guys behind him, that's where the kind of the mess begins, which is kind of fun this year.
Yeah, I mean that makes it for. I mean, last year was very intriguing because of just how top heavy the last year's draft was, and this year it maybe not as top heavy, but I think it's gonna make it for more fun kind of dive into these guys because there's so many variables on what could potentially happen here. So you mentioned some of the defensemen, and we'll talk kind of deeper about the defensemen. But do you think this class in general, there's a lot more defensive talent compared to last year's class, where we didn't see a defenseman go? What was the first defenseman, around like 8 or 9 or 10 or something like that? I know, sorry, there was number 5 to the Habs, and then it was kind of a drop off after there. And even Reinbacher was a big question at number 5, and Habs fans are still very much up in the air on if that was the right decision. But does it feel like it's a deeper defenseman class this year?
Yeah, it's definitely a deeper defenseman class this year. I think you looked at last year and you went, it's Reinbacher, Sandy Pellica. There's a couple of guys, but it really kind of falls off after that. Everyone had huge question marks, and that's not to say there aren't question marks with this year's class, but it's not quite as big of a question mark because you don't have that top end talent at the top end. So everyone has a kind of question marks beyond Celebrini. So I think it's a deeper defenseman draft. I think you're going to see a lot more defensemen go this year in the top 10 in the top first round overall. So it's going to be interesting.
One guy who I think heading into the draft this year was kind of pictured as like the number 2 guy was Cole Yzerman. And we know that guy, he likes to shoot. The Sharks have a prospect in Casper Halden who shoots the puck very well as well. But, this draft, now that we've kind of gotten to the halfway point of the season, he was considered the number 2 guy, maybe number 3 guy. And now he's really started to kind of slide down the boards. Is this because of other guys jumping up, or we just haven't seen Yzerman kind of take his game to the next level? Or what's up with Yzerman?
Well, I think coming into the year, everyone went, this guy is a lethal shooter, a guy that can score a ton of goals. And we wanted to see him take some steps outside of that aspect of his game. Unfortunately, he hasn't really taken many steps outside of that aspect. He is still a lethal shooter. He finds ways to score goals. He's around the net. But the questions come from there. His passing has been a little subpar this year. He's not a guy that's going to look for the pass or look to make a play. If he has the puck on his stick, he's probably shooting it in the offensive zone no matter where he's at. In transition, he's pretty uninvolved. He's not a guy that gets himself extra involved in transition. You don't see him go end to end or carry the puck too often. Defensively, why talk about it? Nothing happens.
My type of guy.
and like I said, offensively, the goal scoring is there, but he needs someone to set that up a lot of times. He can get his own goal sometimes and kind of create his own shot, but you're seeing more and more throughout the year that he's not really playing hockey. He's scoring goals. And I think those are two very different things. You look at a guy in the NBA, this is a lethal three-point shooter. Maybe he doesn't have to play the rest of the game very well, and you have to insulate him. Cole Yzerman's a guy that's going to have to be insulated. And when you're picking second or third overall, you don't want to have to insulate that guy all that much. So I think that's why he's falling down draft boards. Is the goal scoring there? 100%. Everything else has to come away, though.
This year, of course, last year we had the Michkov big question. Ivan Demidov, who is the top Russian prospect. What's his story? Are we going to kind of have the same circus as we did last year with him this year?
Yeah, I don't think Demidov's quite as high level as Michkov. I don't think the shot is as elite. But with Demidov, you have this guy who's constant, no matter what's going on the ice, he's trying to make the play you'd make in an NHL video game. He's trying to make the play that wows everybody, and he does that every single shift. He never simplifies things. He's constantly trying to make that beautiful highlight reel play, and that doesn't always work sometimes. You see the gaps in his game at the KHL level when he's played there, and at the MHL level, he's toying with guys. He's deking and dangling and then passing a puck through a guy's legs onto the stick of a guy like Igor Graf or Ignat Lafulin, who's eligible last year and didn't get drafted. He's doing things in the offensive zone that are so fun, not necessarily translatable, but they're fun to watch. And you see the immense skill level that this kid has. Again, defensively, not much going on sometimes, but this is a kid that does play in transition. He does make some plays. His passing is really good. He can score goals. He does a lot more filled out game, but it's just sometimes you go, just make the simple pass, man. Like there was a guy open on the back door. You didn't need to try to shoot it through your legs or something. Like this is a kid that needs to simplify things because the skill and talent's unreal. It's just, why'd you have to do that this time?
Is he what do you know off the top of your head his contract situation? Is he guys? I mean, I assume he's going to be over in Russia for a little bit. From the sound of it, he sounds kind of like a tweener guy who's a little bit between the MHL and a little bit between the KHL, like you said, right? But I know that was the big talking point with Michkov was you're going to have to wait 3 years, but you're hopefully getting a polished product by them. Is Demidov kind of in the same situation, or what do you expect out of his contract?
I wanted to double check just because I know sometimes these things change overnight with the Russian prospects. But as of right now, he's still only signed right through 24-25. So he could come over a little sooner. With that said, maybe he doesn't need to. He is still a bit of an unfinished product. He does have to develop into some things. And you'd like to see him at least play one solid KHL season. Maybe that is next year. Because this year, I think he's not going to get the KHL run you'd like to see. Yeah. Does he get loaned out to a team like Sochi, similar to Michkov last year? Maybe. And maybe that's where you see him excel in the KHL, where he is kind of allowed to be the guy. Because right now, for that SK team in the KHL, they don't need him to be the guy. They just need him to be a guy. And he's not ever going to do that. So playing at the MHL is probably where he's best to be right now.
All right, before we continue with our good friend Tony, where we're going to start kind of looking at some of the defensemen, kind of some of the middle of the draft class, and some guys who, again, I think the Sharks are really going to try to get themselves a blue chip defensive prospect at some point in this draft. We're going to start kind of talking about those guys and then look at some of the biggest questions. Just need to take a quick break here. I know we spend a lot of time talking about sports just to escape the crazy realities of life, but can we talk about preparing for real life for 1 second? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. I know the holiday season's over, but you might still be traveling somewhere to go see friends, family, whatever it is. And the last thing you want to do is be unprepared to take care of yourself or a loved one in case you fall ill. Jace Medical can give you a peace of mind before you even hop on a flight. The Jace case is packed of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinuses, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. So visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. All right, let's switch to the back end because as a Sharks team who has right now a middle of the round pick with the Penguins pick, and the Sharks definitely have some questions on the blue line, right? They have a lot of defensemen who you're like, oh, that's a nice like 4th, 5th, 6th defenseman. And then outside of Shakira Mukhamadullin, they don't really have a guy where you're just like, okay, I can see him being a potential top pairing guy. I know, again, there's the blue line's going to be kind of, it's going to be your cup of tea on what you're looking for. But how do you kind of have the blue line stacked as of right now, which is some of your favorite blue line guys, kind of coming out of World Juniors?
It's interesting because my guy before the World Juniors was Zeev Buium, a kid played for the United States team. Absolutely fantastic defender. In my opinion, the most well-rounded defenseman. And I think the way he's playing at the college level, it's showing that he doesn't have to cheat for offense, as the guy we'll get to in a little bit. And he's so good defensively in terms of being able to calm things down. That's the aspect that I really like about Zeev Buium's game is he brings things to it. When things start to pop off, he goes, it's okay. Don't worry. I got this. He'll take the puck. He'll skate around with it for a second, get behind his own net, let everything calm down, make a good breakout pass, make a great play in the offensive zone, skate up the ice with it. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. Is he ever going to be elite? Is he going to be a top tip pair guy? Maybe not, but he could be a really solid number 2-3 defenseman. I think that's where his kind of ceiling is. And when you look at the rest of this draft class, you don't really have a true number one. I don't think. I think everyone that's in this draft class has some flaws, and that's where we get to the other college guy, Artem Levshunov, a guy that I was very low on my last rankings. He's probably up a little bit on my board from where he was then, but this is a guy that plays some real cowboy hockey, to take a term from my predecessor on this podcast, Will Scouch. He's a guy that loves to just run and gun. There's so many times where I'm watching this kid play hockey and I'm like, who's that behind the net forechecking? Oh, that's Artem Levshunov, the defenseman. That definitely shouldn't be the first guy in on the forecheck. He's got a guy that gets to the front of the net, does all these crazy things offensively. Really good passer, really good shooter, have a heavy shot. A bit of a physical freak. Straight line, his skating is fantastic. It's when you start to get into these little areas, small ice game, that I start to get concerned. His pivots aren't all that clean sometimes. Defensively, he can be disinterested, or he gets burned. I watched a game of him the other day, and he got burned out wide, and rather than trying to recover, he just pointed at his defensive partner and go get him. Like it's like, it's not how you play defense at the NHL level, but he's got the physical tools. He's willing to kind of mix it up physically, and that's what you want to see. So he's a bet on upside for sure. I prefer Z Boyum. I think he's a bit more of a complete project, and they probably have both the same upside as that number 2-3 guy. Sam Dickinson from the London Knights, another defenseman, really toolsy, good skater, questionable decision making. There have been plenty of times in the breakout where he emerges from behind his own net all the time in the world, and then either ices it or fires it right onto the stick of an opposing player. And that's kind of what you're getting with this draft class. A lot of guys that have the physical tools, or they have the mental game, but they lack that extra skill. They lack that extra decision making. I look up and down my list right now. Adam Juracek, a guy that got hurt at the World Juniors, really physically gifted player, really good skater, shows some really nice offensive touch. But he's not as big as his brother was. David Juracek, Columbus Blue Jackets prospect, quite when he was draft eligible. He's not as physical. He tries to be. He just doesn't have the strength yet. So I really wish he wasn't hurt. He's going to miss, I think, 2 months with the broken ankle, if I'm not mistaken. That's what it was. And we're going to kind of miss out on some of that. Hopefully he can get back and show that he's ready to go. Alphonse Frey, a Swedish kid. This is maybe Z Boyum light in terms, he does a lot of these offensive things really well. He makes a lot of really smart plays, and he's rounding out his defensive game. He's a little bit smaller, so there's concerns there, but he is rounding out his defensive game. He skates really well. He understands how to position guys and position himself defensively. Zane Parikh, absolutely tire fire defensively, absolute wagon offensively. Yes, this is a kid this is a kid that's your fourth forward. Defensively, I've seen him let pucks just go by him because he just didn't feel like touching it at the time. And then in our offensive zone, he's absolutely the man on a mission, taking on every role he can. And then you look up and down this list, Anton Silayev, who I didn't even talk about, is getting a lot of top 10 love, top 15 love. Really big, really toolsy offensive defenseman in the KHL. Scored a ton of points at the start of the year. Everyone was getting hype. Everyone was saying, top 2, top 3, top 4 guy. And now the points kind of stopped coming. And when you look at the points, and this is what I warn people about, it was a lot of point shots or these different things that he'd kind of tap the puck, or a puck would go off him and then someone would score with it and he'd get an assist.
Not sustainable offense.
Yeah, none of it was sustainable. So I know there was a lot of people going, oh, could he be the next Dmitry Simashev? No, because he does, while their physical profile is much the same, Silayev's more of an offensive guy. He doesn't have that refined defensive game that Dmitry Simashev had, who I loved last year. And I think Anton Silayev could get there, but there's a lot of questions. And like I said, I look up and down this defensive list, and I think I named off 7 guys there. All of them have questions. All of them have really fun upside. All of them have things that you're like, man, that could be awesome if he's your second or third best defenseman.
I want to go back to one Adam Yurch, who you mentioned was dealing with the injury. I know kind of, dealing with kind of the same comp with his brother, not as physical, et cetera, as his brother. But I mean, if you're a Sharks team picking around 15, 16, 17, 18, is he a guy where you might be looking at as a potential steal just because of his because of his injury history? And then you let him kind of, and we know the Sharks are very much a let their prospects marinate type of organization. Like, where in a couple of years from now, you're like, wow, how did he get to 15, 16, 17, 18? Look what the Sharks landed to go with, especially if you win the draft lottery and get Macklin Celebrini. Is that a potential route to go for if you're San Jose? And it's kind of looking at the same thing like last year with Quentin Musty. How did Quentin Musty get to 26? And now Sharks fans are like, wow, you guys are all idiots for letting Quentin Musty get to number 26, right?
Yeah, I think it could be that kind of situation. Before the World Juniors, I had him at 9 on my board. He's 6'2", 178. He needs to fill out. Like I said, that strength isn't quite there like his brother's was.
But he's got the frame, right? You're 6'2". It's not like he's not 5'10" where you're trying to pack more muscle on. He's 6'2" and he's 17, 18 years old. Like you can definitely see that. Yeah. So
yeah, he's gonna fill it out. He's gonna become a really solid player in that regard. He likes to mix it up, similar to his brother. I think the one thing I like about Adam Jiricek's game in comparison to his brother is David was a little bit of a freewheeler. He'd go a little bit wild sometimes with the puck offensively. Jiricek, or I shouldn't say Jiricek, Adam is a little bit more tactical. He's a guy that looks for the right play, tries to make the right play, and that means sometimes he's not taking that chance. Sometimes he just filters it to the forward on the half wall or kind of shoots for a pass to the front of the net and allows a guy to tip the puck. There's a lot of things like that I think Adam does a little bit better. With that said, his defensive game, I think, again, more tactical than it was just physical brute force the way his brother's was.
Makes sense. And then again, so if you can kind of continue to build you're hoping that you build the physicality as he continues to kind of fill out. Remember, a lot of these are 17, 18-year-old kids. This is not where they're going to end up with. Another guy I wanted to talk about, because I've watched a fair amount of him, is Sam Dickinson, the London defenseman, right? With some of these kind of junior guys you kind of mentioned, right? Especially this London team. This London team is stacked with talent. How much of it is him kind of, I don't want to say riding coattails, but being part of some of these, a very, very good London team, and how much of it is him kind of driving play?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think there are games where you watch Sam Dickinson and go, what are you going to be tonight? Because one game, he's a really strong puck mover. He can make a good play to break out of the zone. He'll skate the puck up ice. He'll transition the puck through the neutral zone. And you're like, wow, what a good puck mover. But then he makes some errors offensively, and he's not quite doing the thing that you've seen from the past. The next game, he's playing really solid defense. He's killing play along the wall. He's keeping close gaps. But then he makes goofy decisions on the breakout. The following game, he's this offensive dynamo. Give him the puck in the neutral zone or the offensive zone, he's going to make something happen. It's so many times I watch him and I go, what are you being tonight? Like, what defenseman are you? Are you Sam Dickinson, the puck mover? Are you Sam Dickinson, the offensive guy? Are you the defensive guy? Are you somewhere in the middle of those three? Because if this kid rounds out his game, if he can bring all those elements together, he could be a really, really good defenseman. It's just so many times you get 2/3 of it, or you get 1/3 of it. Mm-hmm. You're left going, well, I saw you do this last time. Why can't you do it now? And I think that's the biggest concern for his game. So, while I think some of his points are riding the coattails of that strong London Knights team, passing it to guys like Denver Backe, Easton Cowan, Kasper Heltinen, I think some of it is also just him being able to physically do some things that other defensemen can't. He's a really good skater, a strong puck carrier, a really good passer when he wants to be. Sometimes he just doesn't pay attention, it seems. And I think that's maybe the biggest question.
He's got that ADHD where he's just like, ooh, butterfly type of guy.
Yeah, like I'll never forget. There was a play early in the year where he got the puck behind his own net. He comes out, he skates to the face-off circle, and still no one's applying any pressure. And he kind of scans the ice, winds up, and just bombs the puck down the ice. For what reason? Like you could have skated more, waited for a passing lane to open up. Yeah. No, instead bomb the puck down the ice. Just full on slap shot from your
hit the wrong button. Hit the wrong button.
And that's what it seems like sometimes. It seems like sometimes Sam Dickinson's playing NHL 24 and he hits the circle button or whatever and does a spin or hits the R2 and fires a pass down the ice. He's such a weird player, but he could be so good.
Yeah, he's gonna be so, well, especially when I do draft, he's gonna be so interesting because again, it's like you could see all the pieces there. He puts them all together. You're getting like an amazing defenseman who can do anything you want. But if not, you're getting 1/3 of a good defenseman. So, Before we finish up with our good friend Tony, we talk about some of the big draft questions that still need to be answered heading into the second half. Just need to take a quick break. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't help you just hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to recent Indeed survey. So leverage from over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day. Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preference, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners of the show can get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. As we enter the second half of the draft, so what are some of your biggest questions that you're trying to get answers to with before we start to get to the playoffs and start to kind of get the final tape on some of these guys? So I'm going to kind of go with you. Where do you want to go with this? What are some of the big questions you're trying to figure out?
The first big question is who's going to establish himself as the number 2 guy? Because I think right before
we don't care about number 2, baby. We're number 1.
I know, but let's be honest. The odds aren't always great for first overall. So who's the number 2 guy? Who's the number 3 guy? Mm-hmm. Who's that guy the Sharks are going to get at the top of the draft? Because no one's really establishing themselves. Caden Lindstrom was starting to, and I think that physical freak of a man that plays for Medicine Hat was starting to pull away. He was starting to show, hey, maybe I'm that number 2 guy. But now he's out for 4 to 6 weeks with an injury. He just had surgery last week. Now we're left with questions again. Is Berkeley Catton that guy? Incredibly smart, shades of Zach Benson as a center, but that's not quite the same. And you want to see more from him just in terms of offensive skill. He's so smart. He understands how to drive play. You saw him at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup earlier this year. Best player on the ice for Canada every time. Every time I watch Spokane, he's probably their best player on the ice almost every game. So you're like, what is his ceiling though? Like, is he got enough there to be that number 2 guy? Ivan Demidov, the ultimate wild card. Again, a Russian guy who has all this skill, but can he refine it? Does the team think they can trust a guy like that to refine his game a little bit? Is it a defenseman? Does a Zeev Buium and Artem Levshinov, a Sam Dickinson get up there? It's going to be interesting because that second overall, that third overall, that group there is really, really wide. And then I think the group kind of outside of that, once you get to 15, 16, 17, you start to get to this group of, all right, here's 50 guys that you could reasonably talk about in that range. And every year we kind of get something similar to that. But this year it really feels like it's just a drop off and then a huge group of guys. And there are guys that I know people like on both sides of things, on team and public side, that either weren't on the central scouting list or down as a C grade in the central scouting list, and like, that guy should be a first rounder. It's really, really wide open this year, and seeing some sort of, I don't want to say consensus because I don't like to see consensus, but seeing some sort of establishment of the top tier guys beyond Celebrini and even that second group would be nice.
All right. And then, of course, the Sharks, as they continue to search for a goaltender. Is there any goaltender we're talking about as a potential, maybe? I know goaltending is so fickle. There's so much about your environment. There's so many variables with it. But is there any goaltender like that maybe take a peek at? Because, the Sharks are still going to be looking for kind of that goaltending prospect of the future, right?
Well, the one guy I'll give you is Ryerson Leanders, a guy that plays for Mississauga Steelheads in the OHL. He was a third-ranked OHL or third-ranked North American goalie. Carter George was ahead of him in the OHL as well. But in my opinion, Ryerson Leanders is the class of the goaltending group this year. He's a 17-year-old goalie who's taken on a starting role, earned a starting role last year as a 16-year-old. Had, I think, the second or third most starts ever for a 16-year-old in the OHL. This year, he's absolutely taken the reins and run with it. Mississauga drafted a guy at 7th overall to kind of come in and put pressure on him. And Ryerson Linders has run away with it. He's absolutely established himself as a starter. He's been fantastic. He's in the top 5 across pretty much every goaltending metric in the OHL. And he's doing so on a team that is so young. They're the youngest team in the OHL by quite a bit. It's not really that close. You could add a 19 or a 20-year-old to that team, and they still have a bit to go before they get to that next team. So he's taken this young team. He's winning games for that young team. He's putting them in a playoff spot, and not only putting them in a playoff spot, but at the top of their division, near the top of their conference. He's a little bit undersized, but every goalie in this draft is a little bit undersized. He's only 6 foot. I think he gets a little bit of room to grow. He moves really fluidly in his crease. He's got good vision. I really like Ryerson Linders' game. And if you're going to take a chance on any goalie, it's probably a similar draft class to last year in terms of you don't really see a goalie go until round 2, but then you see a run. If you get a chance to grab a guy like Ryerson Linders early in the second round, that's probably the guy I'd go with.
As a Sharks team that has their own second round pick, which is probably going to be very high. And then it's looking like the Devils pick, it probably won't turn out to it unless they go on a good run in the playoffs here. Looks like the Sharks are going to have 2 second round picks this year. So hopefully, they kind of missed out on the run last year. I think Mike Greer was kind of kicking himself for not being able to at least grab somebody in the last year. And I would be shocked if they don't come out of this year. Again, we have plenty of time to dive into these guys, but I'd be shocked if Mike Greer doesn't have at least a goaltending prospect that she can point to and be like, look, guys, we tried to solve one problem here. So, Tony, any other big questions or anything else you're looking forward to as we kind of enter the second half of the draft here?
My big question is, like, when am I going to get answers? Because this draft class really is just so wide open. Whether it's the goalie group, I say Ryerson Linders is the top guy, but like I said, he's the 3rd guy on the North American Central Scouting list. Who's the defenseman that asserts himself as the top guy? Early in the year was Siliev, and then there was a stage when Levshinov kind of took a run at the top spot. Dickinson was getting kind of some credit as the top defender.
I saw him at 3 at one point sometime this fall. Yeah.
I think it was Craig Button had him at number 3, and now Zeke Williams starting to kind of make a charge to the top of that list. My biggest question is, when am I going to get answers? Because this is a group that's
You're not.
Yeah, probably not. It's a lot of tightly knit groups of here's 4 defenders that could be the top guy, and then here's another group of 5 guys, and then same thing with the goalies. Here's a group of guys that could be the top, and behind Celebrini is really the only true answer, and it's because he's absolutely tearing up that NCAA NCAA season. And when he went to the World Juniors, he was fantastic for Canada. He was their only functional player, honestly, most nights. That was a really bad Canadian team. I called it before the tournament. Go USA. But that team was rough, and Celebrini was able to shine and elevate guys around him. And I think that's the big thing about Celebrini is this is a guy that has gravity to his game. He pulls attention. A defender takes an extra step towards him because they don't know what he's going to do. They don't know if he's going to be the shooter or the playmaker. And then whatever that defenseman makes the choice of, I'm going to cover him as the shooter, doesn't matter. He's going to make a pass. We're going to cover that guy that he's going to pass it to. It doesn't matter. He's going to beat the other defender and get a shot. He really is the top guy in this draft class. I don't think there's any competition, to be completely honest. I'm sure at some point in March, everyone's going to be like, this Joe somebody is challenging Celebrini for 1st overall, because they do it every year. Every year we have that conversation. He's not. Celebrini is the guy, and that's really the only answer we have this year.
He's going to make losing all these games really, really worth it for us Sharks fans, hopefully. We deserve good things. Come on. Tony, you've said it all. Where can the people find you?
You can find me on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at the Tony Ferrari. Most of my work is on the Hockey News. Keep an eye. There will be some things coming out soon that I think some people will like, especially if you're looking for draft content, because let's keep losing, baby.
All right, Tony. We'll catch you later, buddy.
See you later, guys.
All right. Thank you guys for helping kick off the 2024 draft coverage. We'll be back tomorrow. I think we'll do a nice prospect brief. We'll talk about some of the recent Sharks prospects, some of their games. So make sure you guys are following along for that. So that'll be Friday's episode. And then we'll be back on Monday to talk about the Sharks-Ducks game and whatever else continues to happen as the Sharks work their way towards the number one overall pick in this year's draft. So thank you to our friend Tony. Make sure you're following his work. Again, Tony's amazing. Big friend of the show, has been a huge supporter. And anything I need from Tony, he's more than willing to help out. So make sure you go follow along, support his work. He does a great job covering the draft. So, and he'll be on here a bajillion times, I'm sure, between now and the draft. So, and even after the draft, I'm sure as well. So again, make sure you guys are following the show wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. You can follow the show also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter at MyFryhole. Until tomorrow, bye, friends.